Good morning. It feels quite early here in Dunfermline, but it's actually coming up 7:30. I slept in massively. Haven't really made a plan for this video. Me and Molly, if you can see it in the back, we are off on an adventure somewhere to the southwest, so come along and let's see where we end up. December might be dark and cold in Scotland, but that doesn't mean you can't still go for an adventure if you see a gap in the weather. Molly and I left the streets of Dunfermline behind and headed into the countryside of the borders. Fields opened up ahead of us, and we passed through wee villages and winding, tree-lined lanes until we came to Traquair House. Now, one very quick stop on our way. We're at Traquair House and the famous Bear Gates. Now, these were built in 1738. Mark this grand entrance to Scotland's oldest continually habited home. 7 years later, Bonnie Prince Charlie stays the night as he goes south with the Jacobite army, and the loyal 5th Earl of Traquair locks the gates behind him. He declares that they will stay that way until a Stuart sits on the throne once again. And the last of the Stuart descendants have died, so it's still locked. Everybody else has to go by the side entrance over that way. That was just a pit stop to stretch the legs. From Traquair we're carrying on southwest. Skirting what was once the Ettrick Forest, passing St Mary's Loch, we come onto a beautiful stretch of the A708 road. Who says you need to go to the Highlands for incredible scenery? Then we arrived at our first big stop, the Grey Mare's Tail waterfall, which tumbles down 60 metres into the gorge from Loch Skeen high above. Well, the forecast said it was going to be nice and dry. The forecast lied. So we're sitting in the car, regretting all of our decisions. But we're here now, so might as well go. She always makes it look so easy. It's not easy. And I'm still carrying a bit of Christmas weight from last Christmas. Any excuse to stop, just to admire the view. Now this isn't actually a difficult hike. Don't let my gasping breaths mislead you. It's very steep to start, but you have the benefit of stone steps, and it'll take you maybe half an hour to an hour to reach the top, depending on how many photo stops you take. It looks good enough from the ground, but it looks even better from the sky. Now, once you're at the top of the waterfall, you can carry on towards Loch Skeen, but we had other things to show you today, so I cut this one short. Now, we did record a story at the top of the waterfall back there, then realised that it was so loud I don't think you could hear me. So, story time. The Grey Mare's Tail waterfall, this area was used by Covenanters in the 17th century. Covenanters are people who were persecuted for their religious beliefs. They wanted to be Presbyterian, the king wanted everybody to be Anglican or Episcopalian. So, they went out into wild areas and had their church services there, where hopefully soldiers wouldn't find them. That's why this area, with its steep ravines and the boggy ground, was perfect, hiding away from mounted soldiers. They weren't entirely alone up here. No, this area is known for its wild goats, although we haven't seen any today, which is probably for the best since we've got Molly. So when two Covenanters, heard the clopping of hooves, they started to get the idea of roast a goat for lunch. So they followed the noise. They peered over the ledge, but it wasn't a goat they saw. It was the devil himself, busy roasting a sinner over the fire. He wasn't so busy that he didn't notice his two unwanted guests, though. He turned and he stared deep into their soul. All the two Covenanters could do was recite as many Bible passages as they could remember. Luckily they were good Christians, because it was far too much for the devil to take. He had one last trick up his sleeve before he fled. He transformed himself into an expensive bundle of leather, and he leapt off the top into the grey mare's tail waterfall, hoping to lure the two men to their deaths after it. Fortunately, these two men weren't motivated by greed. They didn't need wealth to be happy. So they stood their ground, and they lived to tell the tale.
After the spot of lunch for both me and Molly, it was time to jump back in the car and carry on the journey. A short drive away is the town of Muffet on the River Annan, home to the narrowest hotel in the world, Muffet Toffee, and not a bad coffee.
Now the town of Muffet, the very quick story here is that this ram was commissioned in 1875. It was a gift to the town by a local businessman to mark its long tradition of sheep farming. When it was unveiled, the legend is that one of the local farmers screamed out, "It's got nae lugs!" because the sculptor William Brodie had forgotten to add any ears. And it's true. If you get close enough behind those horns, nothing but wool.
Country roads behind, it's time for a very quick blast on the motorway as we head for Lochmaben Castle.
We're here now, Lochmaben Castle. An important part of the Robert the Bruce story, but unfortunately it is surrounded by Harris fencing. Lochmaben was home to the Bruces since before Robert the Bruce's time. It's actually thought his grandfather probably built the first castle here, because the original Lochmaben was way in the middle of a golf course now. That was then taken by King Edward I of England, and he probably built most of what we really see now.
After Robert the Bruce became king, he took back Lochmaben before it fell to the English again. Back and forward it went until Archibald the Grim Douglas recaptured it for good in 1385. There's also a fairly recent legend of a Lochmaben vampire, after locals reported finding animal carcasses scattered amongst the ruins. One paranormal investigator claims to have seen the hooded vampire at Lochmaben, which then leapt from tree to escape. It looks like the fences erected by Historic Scotland have kept the vampire out for now.
And what's a little bit frustrating is that you walk all the way along this path they've left just to be met with a dead end. And I gotta walk all the way back. Not that Molly really cares, she's just happy to be out and about.
We were really racing against the sunset now. I had one location I was dying to visit, but I didn't want to shortchange you all, so we made sure to fit in at least a couple more stops along the way. First up, Gilnockie Tower, which is open to the public during the tourist season, but funnily enough not in the middle of December.
The Gilnockie Tower here is home to Clan Armstrong, the Clan Armstrong Museum. Now think of the most famous Armstrong you know. I'll give you a clue. He is famous for taking small steps for man and giant leaps for mankind. Yeah, Neil Armstrong, when he was over in Scotland, visited Gilnockie Tower to trace his roots, and in the process he was given the freedom of Langham, the only person to ever be given the freedom of Langham.
The Armstrongs were infamous border reivers, families who loved nothing more than riding their hardy wee horses across the hills to steal their neighbours' cows. It was almost like a local sport, just with a bit more bloodshed. The one clan chief who may well have lived at Gilnockie, Johnny Armstrong, became so rich and powerful that the King of Scots had him murdered. But that's another story for another time.
Now this area, being so close to the English border, which is literally there on the other side of that river, this place has seen an awful lot of conflict. Not just from Scottish armies invading England and English armies invading Scotland, but amongst each other. The borders clans, the border reivers, liked to rob from anybody. They didn't really care what nationality you were. So that's why there's so many castles, little towers, peel towers around this area, because people needed to protect whatever they owned, really. And would you look at that? We've got a rainbow, although unfortunately we also have rain, which we didn't have just a few minutes ago.
A very quick stop now at the Milnholm Cross, said to memorialise Alexander Armstrong. You can just make out the Armstrong crest and a sword carved into the cross. The story goes that Alexander stepped in to save a young girl from being molested by Lord Soulis. Soulis then invited him to Hermitage Castle and had him murdered for his trouble. Guess where we're heading next?
Hermitage Castle is known as the guardhouse of the bloodiest valley in Britain. So it's no surprise it's picked up a few stories in the last 800 years or so. I mean, even its construction almost caused a full-scale war between Scotland and England because we're so close to the border. Its most notorious tenant, or owner if you like, was a guy, William de Soulis, who was known as a wizard. Not really the kind that came out with weird magic spells, but one that liked tormenting the local population. In fact, Soulis was so evil that he somehow conjured up a wee creature to help him. The only thing that loved bloodshed as much as he did, and that was a redcap. A redcap is a little bit like an evil gnome or brownie or something like that. The big difference is it has to continually keep its hat soaked in blood to maintain its deep red colour.
In return for the carnage that the redcap required to sustain itself, it granted Soulis a magical ability. He could neither be bound by rope nor harmed by steel. Believing himself invincible, the Lord of Liddesdale grew bolder. His deeds grew darker, until the local population rose up. Where rope couldn't bind him, they wrapped him in lead, and where steel couldn't harm him, they boiled him to death in a cauldron. The redcap wasn't so easy to deal with, though, and legend says he's still inside Hermitage Castle, there watching, waiting, and dropping rocks on any unwanted visitors.
Well, that's Hermitage Castle. I've wanted to come here for a very long time. It's a pity that it's actually closed and there's fences all around it. It's also getting so late that I'm kind of running out of sunlight here. I will be back, don't worry, and I will show you the inside of Hermitage Castle. Let's just hope we don't run into any redcaps. Well, that's it from me and Molly. I hope you've enjoyed following along our wee adventure to the south and west of Scotland. I didn't really get to see about half of what I was hoping to, but that is the danger of travelling in winter in Scotland. It's not always the conditions, it's more the fact that the sun comes up so late and goes down so early. Now I know I'm still not an expert when it comes to YouTube videos, but I'm doing my best. I've got a lot of places to share, a lot of stories to tell, so I think I'm supposed to tell you to like and subscribe or something like that. Either way, just stick about for the next one. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it.
Thanks a lot for watching, and if you've got any suggestions for where you think Scotland's stories should explore next, then pop them in the comments and I'll see what I can do.